Hi, I want to tell you about the Prosperous and Inclusive Planetary Futures module that Ida Kubashevsky and I will be convening. This module, as the name implies, is about how to create prosperous and inclusive planetary futures. What does that mean? How do we envision a world that is prosperous, inclusive, sustainable, that protects our natural and social capital assets. That is the kind of world that I think we all want. There are several tools that we can use to explore those kinds of futures, and recognizing that we can't predict the future, but we can, to a certain extent, help to create the future. And one way of doing that is to first envision the kind of future that we want, and to engage the population, the decision makers, in that process, but also in the process of making the transition from where we are to what that future might look like. One of the tools that we'll be talking about is something called scenario planning. You may have heard of this, or even used this tool in some of your work. It's become very popular, in businesses and communities and in NGOs and a whole range of things, because it's a way of dealing with uncertainty about the future and trying to understand what the range of plausible futures are. And by understanding that, we can begin to move the system in the direction of the kind of futures that we prefer. Your vision for what the company should look like really is a way of motivating the kinds of changes that are needed to help get the company there. Likewise, at the scale of the whole country, or the whole world for that matter, we really need to have a positive vision of the kind of world that we would like. And I think many, if not most of us, agree that the business as usual world is not headed in the right direction. It's going to take some major transformations in order to shift the dial and move us away from a world that's headed for climate change and increasing inequality and a loss of well-being among a large fraction of the population. How do we actually create a world of sustainable well-being? And by using this idea of alternative futures and that are plausible, how do we then use that as a framing for thinking about the kind of world that we want? How do we engage the larger population and decision makers in that process of thinking about better worlds? How do we understand what people's real preferences are for those alternative futures? And we've done some research along those lines. In Australia, we did a survey of 4 alternative futures, which often fall into 4 archetypes. A business as usual scenario, a sort of policy reform, middle of the road scenario, a major transformation, sustainable development goals type of future, and a sort of collapse scenario. And I think the obvious results were that most people prefer the more sustainable, more prosperous, more just kind of future. And also people want to avoid the collapse kind of future. So understanding how those processes work, I think, is what this module is largely going to be about. And I hope you can join us in this process. It will be very fun and very creative, I think, and hopefully we'll be able to make a difference in the kind of world that we end up living in. Thanks.